You're probably wondering what this puzzle is, or maybe how I made it, or even why it doesn't have stickers right now. I'll get to all of those things, but the first thing I gotta tell you is that this is day 24 of the Puzzle Advent Calendar collaboration. But this is not the last video. The final video will be uploaded tomorrow, December 25th, on Greg's channel, so make sure to check him out, subscribe to him so you don't miss the video. This puzzle is my fourth and final puzzle that I made for the Advent Calendar. This puzzle is the X-Square-1. It's kind of similar to a square 1 in that it has the faces of a square 1 on some sides, but it also has them on additional sides. And the core mechanism is a 2x2, which allows all 4 of the square 1 faces to switch pieces. The version you see here had not a design flaw, but a printing flaw, which is why it didn't have stickers yet. So let's take a look at how I made this puzzle. Basically how the X-Square-1 works is I have a mini 2x2, and then I add this kind of piece onto it. You can see that this side has nothing, but that this side and this side has room for additional pieces. And that's going to be these pieces that basically get in here and turn through this section to act as the extra faces. And so I'm going to glue this to the 2x2, and I've already done most of that. You can see that I have just a single corner left and all of the others have been glued. Now the reason for that is I don't think it'll actually be possible to insert the square 1 pieces if I finish gluing all of the 2x2 extensions. So I'm gonna put in the square 1 pieces and then I'll glue in the last corner. So I'll get to that. Alright, I have added the first layer. You can see it here. It turns fairly okay actually. So now basically what I'm going to do is continue putting on these layers until all I have left is a few pieces that belong on this last extension piece. But everything else is already on here. And then I'll glue the last extension piece with the final pieces onto the puzzle. Alright, so the puzzle is assembled. These turns work reasonably well, as you can see, and if you turn this like this and this like that, then it is possible to make this kind of turn. But the problem is the turns that are on these 2x2 axes have issues with stability of these square 1 type pieces. So, and pieces do have a tendency to pop very easily. It's caused by an issue in the printer. You can see that there's big gaps between the 2x2 pieces where the design didn't have those. So if I want to make a version of this that's stable, I'm going to have to fix that issue and maybe have a different mechanism. So I'll be scrambling and solving this thing inside because I don't want to lose any pieces onto the grass. This is the result of me reworking the puzzle a bit and then stickering it. The original 2x2 I used with its extensions is this one. And you can see that there are large gaps in between the pieces here. It's even more visible here. This is problematic because it made pieces like pop out basically with every turn because nothing was holding them in the puzzle if they were here, and that was a major issue. Now the files were correct. The actual problem was with the printer. It was kind of making these pieces too small in these directions. And you can see with the final one, there's basically no gaps. I mean, it kind of looks like there's some gaps, but there actually aren't. These are just the fillets. So this problem was solved And the current version still pops sometimes, but it's much more usable than this one was, which I'm glad about. I'm probably gonna salvage this 2x2, or maybe not. I have a lot of these 2x2s, so maybe I don't need to salvage this one. As for this puzzle, let's see how it turns. Now, when the puzzle is in this position, you can only make these 4 face turns, because you can't make this turn because you can see this cut doesn't line up with this cut. However, if you turn this like that, then you can actually make the vertical turn. The vertical turn actually works like decently well. The problem is you actually have to kind of hold the pieces a little bit just to make sure that these tiny little edges don't pop out. It's kind of silly that I messed up on such a simple mechanism, and I can see why the pieces are definitely willing to pop. But at the same time, if you hold them like just minimally, it's not that big of a deal, so you can see that I've made all these turns and no pops. The big problem is, however, when you try making the huge turn, which is the one that cuts through all 4 of these faces. That one is very, very difficult to do successfully without popping the puzzle. And in fact, I'm going to try avoiding it as much as possible because, okay, like you have to align these 4 like this, and then you turn it, and just there's a whole lot that locks up and prevents the puzzle from turning. And if you try to push it when it locks up, then the pieces are gonna pop. So I'd much prefer to stick to these turns that go through the 2x2 faces. Another interesting property this puzzle has is it does have a little bit of overhang bandaging, which is, you can see that if you turn this like this, you can no longer turn these 2 layers. A quirk is that if you line this up to make a turn through this axis, you can only turn this one this way to make a turn like that, and then so on. So you can't like turn it the other way, which is definitely restricting. And this puzzle actually does a shapeshift. You can see that you've seen that so far I've only been making 180-degree turns, but you can make these 90-degree turns, and I mean, the puzzle's not falling apart. The popping issue is only during the actual turns and not after you've made a turn. Anyway, this is a nice little pattern that I just made that I think looks very interesting. Like you have this green cross here, this blue cross here, and then all these have kind of interesting looking checkerboard patterns. Anyway, it is time to scramble the puzzle. I'm gonna first do full turns, meaning exchanging pieces from this square one face to this square one face, and between these, and maybe, just maybe, I'll try doing one of these turns. Let's see. If it doesn't work out, then I'm just gonna have to scramble it without doing this kind of turn. Let's see, where is it locking up? Here. Where is it locking? Okay. There we go. Wow. That was actually not as bad as it usually is. Like, nothing popped, there's only one lockup. So, occasionally, if you align it just right, it actually works nice. Okay, this, even if it isn't the best turning puzzle, I must admit that it looks absolutely insane when it is scrambled. Now, I am going to solve the puzzle, but it would be insane to try and solve it on camera because I need to figure out how to solve it, and if it pops, it could take a little bit of time to figure out how exactly I need to put it back together. So I'm going to take this off camera, solve it, and then get back to you with my final thoughts on the puzzle. Alright, it's been about an hour, and I did manage to get this thing solved. It only popped about 3 to 4 times, which I actually think isn't that bad, and it was always a minor pop, so I was able to put it back together. The process was actually very interesting. Now, the first step was to get it back to the point where this 2x2 section is intact, and this 2x2 section intact. And that basically means that all 4 of these side faces can turn. They actually turn like much better than before. I think they've gotten broken in. Okay, and after that I solved, not this one, I solved this layer, and then kind of cycled pieces between these 3 other faces because I wanted to keep this wide move to a minimum. So I basically did it so that the pieces that belonged on these 2 puzzles were contained in these orbits, and the pieces that belonged here were contained in this orbit and this orbit, which I messed up a little bit, but it was fine. And then I just solved these 2 and these 2 layers as 2 separate square ones, which actually didn't take that long. I'm not sure if there's parity that you can get, but if there is, then I didn't get any. Now, this puzzle is not something I would want to solve again. I am really interested in redesigning it, and I know how to make it so that it doesn't pop. In fact, it's really silly that this one actually pops. It's just that this project overall was kind of really rushed, as I only started designing this several days ago. But I do definitely want to revisit this with a new and improved version sometime in 2019. Same applies to my X-Cube. I'm not sure if I'll keep the mechanism of the 2x2 extension mod. I might instead go for a full mechanism, but I also might not. I kind of like the way this works overall. But this is the X-Square-1. Even if it doesn't turn the best, I think it looks absolutely amazing. I love how tiny these stickers are, and like just their overall aesthetic. And then these faces look, and then these large faces look very cool. I hope you liked the puzzle as well. Thank you all very much for watching. Have a good day, and don't forget to check out and subscribe to Greg for tomorrow's Advent Calendar video.